Hi, and thank you for watching us here at Tax Talk UK, where we talk about all things tax and help you to navigate the tax system as it applies to you. As part of our new bite-sized demo series showing you how to complete your self-assessment tax return, today I'm going to talk about the employment section of the tax return and just a basic overview of the things that you need to consider. So before I do that, if I could ask, if you're new here, please do take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you'll easily be able to refer back to this information should you need to, as well as being able to access other information that we have on a whole host of different topics, all aimed at supporting you in your self-employment. If you navigate to the playlist section of our YouTube channel, there you will find the various topics loosely catalogued to help you find the information that that is relevant to you. And within the playlist section, you will see the playlist for the bite-sized demo series, helping you to complete your self-assessment tax return. So back then to completing the employment section of your self-assessment tax return. As you will likely know, when you are submitting your tax return online, then once you first start the return, you will be presented with the section to tailor your return. And through this section enables HMRC to know which forms are relevant to you and which ones aren't. And the beauty of doing this is that any sources of income that you don't have, that you don't need to declare, you won't be presented with the relevant forms. You'll only be presented with the relevant forms for the sources of income that you need to declare. So today I'm going to be looking at an overview for the employment, completing the employment section where you've received income through the PAYE system. As always, please do ask questions because this helps us to understand what information would be more helpful to drill into and provide more detail on. So today we're just going to look at a basic overview of the things to be aware of. So if you have indicated on your self-assessment tax return that you have employment, then you will be presented with the employment section. So I'm going to show you that form just because it's easier then to explain what we're looking at. So here we are then, the employment section. So the first thing to mention is if you have more than one source of PAYE income, it may be because you actually have two jobs running alongside each other, or perhaps you've changed employment through the year. Regardless, you will in the tailor my return section, you will have the option to say how many sources of income of this type, and you will need to fill a separate one for each employer. So you will put how many employments you've had, and then it will give the option to name the employers on that tailor my return. So in that event, if you have more than one employment, you will be presented with a separate form to complete for each employer, and you will have, if you're still in that employment, you should have been issued with a P60, and if you have left the employment, then you will have been issued with a P45 on leaving. So one of those, you will have one of those, but not both. If you are not able to locate the paperwork that you've been issued, or you're having any difficulty, you can sign up for a personal tax account on gov.uk, and that will enable you to be able to access the information that would have been provided on the P60 or the P45. So that is very useful if you're having difficulty obtaining the information that you need. It's important not to go from your last payslip because that may not necessarily have all of the correct information that you need. It's important that you do work from the P60 or the P45 or the personal tax account information will be the same information that would be provided on the P60 or the P45. Another thing to mention, if you've had more than one employer, if you've left one employment and gone on to a new employment, and the first employer provided you a P45, you gave that to your new employer, then on your P60 for your new employment, you will notice that it will likely have figures for in previous employment and for this employment and the total. And the figure that you want on that particular employer is just for in this employment, because the in previous employment, you will notice, matches the information on your P45, which you will remember, as I just mentioned, you're going to submit that separately. So therefore, if you entered the total as well as the two sources, you would be duplicating the income. So the way to check that it is correct is that if in that scenario, if you just had those two jobs, then once you have submitted or once you have completed, sorry, both of the employment pages for each of the employers, the total amount showing on your tax calculation should be the total amount that you've earned. If it's more than that, then it's likely that you may have used the total for the year rather than the total for this employment. If you've only had one source of employment, or they've run concurrently, then that won't be relevant, and you'll only have in this employment section. So that's one thing that's important to mention. So that's relating to the figures that you're going to put in box 1, and you're also going to take the information from your P45 or your P60 to put the tax that has been deducted in box 2. If you haven't had anything deducted, then leave that blank. If you were refunded, then you would put a minus before the figure in your tax return. And this is really important to put this figure, because as you will know, in the UK, we have a tax system that is cumulative, which means that all of your income from all different sources throughout the tax year is added up, and that is how your liability is determined. And any tax that was deducted at source will then be taken off your liability. So if you don't accurately enter the tax on this section, then that tax won't accurately be taken into account. Your PAY and tax reference, your PAY tax reference of the employer will be on your P60 or your P45, and that information also will be on your personal tax account if you're referring to there. And this is important, of course, that HMRC can tally the information their end. Of course, we also have to declare any tips or other payments that we've received through our employment that aren't included in our P60. And we won't talk about the directorship in this video, nor will we talk about off payroll working engagements, because that relates to IR35, and if that's relevant to you, you're likely to know that already. So then moving on to benefits. So historically, if you've received benefits from your employment, you'll be given a P11D at the end of the tax year, and that information will be exactly transferred. The same as the P60 information is transferred, that information will be transferred to your tax return. So the which box to put the figures on will be the same as on your P11D. Something to note on this that has prompted some questions recently. So in more recent years, employers have had the ability to payroll expenses, and going forward at some point in the future, it will be mandatory for all expenses to be payrolled. And so, of course, when the P11D is issued to you, you will notice that your tax code should be different from standard. And this is so that the tax that is due on your expenses is collected throughout the tax year. But of course, if things changed and HMRC aren't aware, then it could be that the wrong tax has been collected. So payrolling the benefits enables your employer on each pay period to work out how much benefit you've had in that time and add it to your pay to ensure a more accurate system of taxing your expenses throughout the tax year. Now, in the event that your employer has payrolled your expenses, then the expense figure will be included on your P60, so you won't need to fill this section in. If you fill the section in and the expenses has been payrolled, then that will mean you will be duplicating the expense and effectively inflating your liability more than it needs to be. If you're not sure, if you ask your employer, if you ask them for your copy of your P11D, then they will simply tell you if they've payrolled your benefits, and in some cases it may show on your payslip anyway that the expenses have been payrolled. So it's important, if the expenses haven't been payrolled, that the accurate figures are reflected on here that match your P11D that have been submitted. If you feel that those figures are not correct, don't simply put the correct or what you believe to be the correct figures on here, because it needs to match up what's been reported from your employer. If you feel that the figures are wrong, you need to go to your employer, explain why they were wrong, and then if they are in fact wrong, then your employer will need to correct their submission to make sure that it matches up what you've submitted as to what they've submitted. So both sides. So don't just simply enter what you think needs to match what's been submitted. And employment expenses. So we talk about this in quite detail in another video, but this is any expenses that you have incurred that really are for the benefit of your employer, but your employer hasn't reimbursed you for. So you would put those on here, and the fixed rate deductions for certain industries and certain roles, you are entitled to a certain fixed rate. And again, we do talk about that in more detail, so in a different video. So I won't talk about that again here. So hopefully that helps you to understand if you need to complete the employment section of your self-assessment tax return. Some of those things won't be relevant to you, some will. If you have any questions, please do feel free to ask those in the comments. And as I say, that does help us to understand which information it would be more useful to provide more detail on. So the chances are, if you are wondering something, then somebody else may be too. So as I say, do feel free to ask your questions in the comments, or let us know anything that more explanation would be helpful. So thank you very much for watching, and as I mentioned, if you're not already, please do take a moment to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please do have a look at our playlist section and have a look through the information that will be relevant to you. And if you find the information helpful, please do take a moment to like the video. Again, that helps us to understand which topics are the most helpful, and when we have lots of questions, it helps us to prioritize the topics that are going to be useful for the most people. Thank you very much. Goodbye.